Noise is anything that interferes with the accurate transmission of a message between a sender and a receiver. So if Julie and I are having a conversation, there's some things she wants to say to me, and she wants to make sure I understand, and there's some things that I want to say to her, and I want to make sure she understands. And noise is anything that gets in the way of the accurate transmission of those messages and maybe reduces the likelihood that we'll accurately transmit those messages and understand where each other are coming from. And there's 4 types of noise. There's internal noise, there's external noise, there's emotional noise, and there's cultural noise. Internal noise is noise that happens within us. And an example might be, because most of us can relate to this, if you have something on your mind as you're going into an interaction, you may not be able to give a person your full attention. That's internal noise. That can get in the way of the accurate transmission of those messages and actually walking away with an understanding relative to that interaction or that conversation that you're having. External noise is noise that happens outside of you. And a good example of external noise is actually loud noises. Another example, which we might not see so much in a group this size, but if I was doing a presentation and there were 60 or 70 people in the room and there were, say, 10 or 11 tables, there'd be side conversations going on. And that's one of the things that we learn when we do presentations, is that there is a strong positive correlation between the number of people in the room and the number of side conversations. So if you have a presentation you're doing for 10 people, not much side conversation. You're doing it for 80 people, whole lot of side conversation. And those side conversations are an example of external noise that we have to account for if we want to make sure people understand our message. With me so far? Okay. Emotional noise is, in a sense, a form of internal noise. It's basically noise that interferes with, or anything that interferes with our understanding because it is affecting our emotions. And I'll give you a couple of simple examples. One is, if you are having an interaction with a person that you don't particularly care for, that's a whole lot of noise. That's a whole lot of emotional noise, because you're not necessarily wanting to hear what they have to say. You're not necessarily wanting to be in the same room with them. You're not necessarily wanting to engage in this interaction. So that's a significant amount of emotional noise. Another example is, if you're having a conversation about a topic that you really don't want to talk about, that maybe you're not real comfortable with, that raises your anxiety or increases your stress, that's another example of emotional noise, and I probably don't have to tell you that can really it can really negatively affect your interaction with another person. And then the last type of noise is simply cultural noise, and that's the noise that occurs based out of our differences. And the reality is, in most interactions, there are going to be some differences. There may be more similarities, and we can do a better job of using those similarities to build a bridge across those differences, but there are going to be some differences. And I'll give you an example, because for those of you who were at the meeting last month, we had a speaker that talked about millennials and talked about the different age groups, and I thought he did an excellent job pointing out the differences between those. If you have a person who is, say, in their teens interacting with somebody in their 50s, there's going to be some noise involved. There's going to be some words that each person might use that the other can't relate to. There's going to be some cultural differences that the other might not be able to relate to. That's going to be an example of noise, or specifically cultural noise. Another example are our own unconscious biases and our hidden stereotypes, the things that we're biased about that we don't even recognize. That's another form of potential noise. Language differences, another form of potential noise. If you're having a conversation with someone for whom English is not a primary language, and perhaps they speak it, but it's not the primary language, there's a potential of noise there in terms of not being able to accurately transmit those messages as effectively as possible. So that's noise.